Hey everyone, I wanted to share with you today a tutorial on using Jane Davenport's new mermaid markers. These are a dye-based ink that go into aqua brush markers, and I have been working with them for a little over a week. I've been working with them like crazy and I absolutely love them, and I thought it'd be fun to show you some different techniques using them. And since one of my favorite things to paint is faces, I went ahead and decided to do a painting of Frida Kahlo. So as you can see, the markers work really well with water. I'm just going over some of those initial strokes that I did with a couple of the markers with just a water-filled paintbrush. And as long as you go after the paint pretty quickly and you don't let it dry, it will blend really nicely like you can see. And I'm using watercolor paper also. This is in my Strathmore Visual Journal. It has 140-pound watercolor cold press paper. So it's a good thick heavy paper and it's one of my favorites to use. So I know that it'll take a lot of wear and tear and it'll stand up to it, and so that's why I chose that one for this tutorial. So I'm just layering colors and showing you how easy it is to apply different colors and see kind of how they intermingle together really nicely, especially once you add water. And yeah, you can get a really nice soft look even though the initial colors are very, very vibrant. And I'll show you a little later in the video the vibrancy of the color and how you can use that to your advantage as well. So the two colors mainly that I'm using right now are called Beach and Coral. And I thought they would mix nicely to make a nice skin tone. And they matched pretty well with the photos that I was looking at of Frida Kahlo. Just going over and blending a little bit more with my paintbrush and some water. And if you can notice on her neck, now that that coral has dried a little bit, it doesn't want to move as much with the water. So that's something to keep in mind, is that once it's dry, it might come up a little bit with the water, but if it's completely dry, like overnight, it's not going to come up very much at all. So just something to note. And I'm using the color Reef. This is a very deep brown for her eyes. And I only wanted to apply a little bit because otherwise it will come out very, very dark even when the water is added. It'll look almost black, and I wanted there to be some depth showing in her eyes there. And Reef has turned out to be one of my absolute favorite colors to work with because not only can you get that really, really deep brown, but as you can see, when it's applied lighter and used with water, it's almost a mahogany. It comes out with a little bit of a reddish tone that is really pretty. So now I'm just doing a wash of water, just applying some water to the flowers in her hair so that the jellyfish color, which is the next marker I'm using, will go down a little bit paler than its full-blown color, which is a really pretty purple. And when you use jellyfish at its maximum effect, as you can see now on the areas where I didn't do a wash, you can see more of the true color. It's a really beautiful, sort of a medium lavender tone. I'm not sure what to compare it to, but yeah, it's great. Her markers are wonderful too for adding water to, as you can see, because they are so reactive with water, especially when you first apply them, and it can really give you some cool effects. So now I am being very, very bold, and I'm adding the color Lobster to her cheeks. And you'll see a little bit later what I do here to take down the this super bold color. But if you notice on Jane's pencil pouch, which is off to the left there, this is a really popular technique for coloring women's cheeks and faces. And I wanted to try that out with the lobster. Now in this case, I used a little bit too much, but I will show you how you can remedy that. And this also gives you a chance to see how, when applied at, at its maximum strength, how this red color will start to thin out with water, how that looks, how it looks layered over orange and yellow tones. And I actually really liked that watercolor effect that's showing up on her left cheek right now, just how the water naturally moves. And that's something that I really enjoy about watercolors in general, and is especially true of her markers, is that the unpredictability of the way that the inks will eventually dry and how they'll sort of mingle with the water is one of the really fun parts of watercolors, and how I think you can get some of the prettiest effects. And her markers in particular, to me, with layering and using water, really show off that the beautiful aspect of watercolors in just a really awesome way. So now her face does look kind of almost marbled, and so this is what I was referring to earlier. I'm just using some plain white gesso and going over some of the areas of her face. And this was more of an experiment. I had used gesso over her mermaid markers earlier in the week, and they did great. But I did, like I said, want to lighten up some of the red because it came out so bold. And you'll see as the gesso dries that the color will still peek through, but it's definitely not as huge of a pop as it was initially. And gesso just happens to be one of my personally favorite tools to work with in general, so. She also has gesso in her mixed media line, and there I am just doing some highlights on the flowers. She has quite a few products in the mixed media line that I have either not been able to get my hands on because they are selling out like hotcakes. I do have myself on a wait list for several of her products, but this was just to give you a general idea. Now this marker that I'm using is actually by Pentel. Because Jane does not yet have a black mermaid marker, and who knows, she's sort of hinted at there might be more to come in her media line, so possibly there will be a black mermaid marker coming. One of the tricks that I found to that is to use one of her darker colors. So in this case, I am using the Pentel Pocket Brush pen, and it's Black India ink, and for some reason it was giving me a lot of trouble. It should still be really juicy because I haven't had it very long, but I don't know if it was the texture of the paper or if the pen really is drying out, but as you can see, it's really not flowing very well there. And so by happy accident, I found that if you apply either Reef, that brown color that I referred to earlier, or any of the darker colors, like Deep Sea is a very deep violet color. If you don't mess with it at all, if you don't add any water to it, it will appear black. So that's just something really cool to note, and a way to kind of get around the no black mermaid marker. So now I'm just applying, I believe that color is Coral, on her lips, and a little bit more Beach. Beach has ended up being one of my, well, I love all the markers, but Beach is one that I reach for pretty often because it works really well as a skin tone. And so that's just applying the color straight from the marker, and you can always give your marker barrel a little squeeze if it's not flowing as much as you like. And that's another fun aspect of the markers, is you can squeeze to get more of it flowing, and then you'll get a really vibrant color that comes out when that ink starts to really flow. But they also flow quite nicely on their own, even without the extra push. So now I'm just blending, using a little more water. I didn't want to flood her face with water, but I definitely wanted to soften some of the harder edges. Now I'm using that deep sea color that I referred to earlier. It's the very deep violet, and as you can see, it works pretty well on its own as a black color. If I were to add water to it, it would pop up with some blue and purple tones, but on its own it works really well as a black. For some reason this part didn't film, but not a big deal because it didn't have to do with the mermaid markers. I did do a background of cobalt blue. That's the color Frida Kahlo's house, and I thought it'd be really appropriate for a background color for her, and I did that with gouache paint. So what I just did there was I squeezed a little bit of her jellyfish color into the gesso itself and made a really pretty kind of pale bluish pink color, or excuse me, not pink, pale bluish purple color, to give her just some funky little highlights and just to kind of play around with the gesso when it's been dyed. And the way you would do that is, I usually work straight from the lid of the gesso jar, but you can also apply it in like a little container or something if you don't want to get your lid dirty. And you just hold the marker right above wherever your gesso is and drop a couple of drops in. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Here's just a couple of extra shots to show you, and thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.